The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Jesus said to his disciples, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine grower. He takes away every branch in me that does not bear fruit, and every one that does he prunes, so that it bears more fruit. You are already pruned because of the word that I spoke to you. Remain in me as I remain in you. Just as a branch cannot bear fruit on its own unless it remains on the vine, so neither can you unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever remains in me and I in him will bear much fruit, because without me you can do nothing. Anyone who does not remain in me will be thrown out like a branch and wither. People will gather them and throw them into a fire, and they will be burned. If you remain in me, and my words remain in you, ask for whatever you want, and it will be done for you. By this is my Father glorified, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples." The Gospel of the Lord. So when I was a kid, there were these shows on Sunday morning that I would watch. And as I watched them, about the time, it was just getting good, it would go off. You'd have to watch next week, right? They got me every week. They got me every week with that. And it wasn't that I would tune in the following week. I would oftentimes be left not knowing how the story ended, but nonetheless, or how the story continued. So today in the Acts of the Apostles, we get set up with a problem, right? What's happening here? Do you have to be circumcised to be saved or not? You have to tune in tomorrow to find out, okay? You have to tune in tomorrow to find out. You have to come back tomorrow. We have to read ahead in your missal to find out. But you should already know. You should already know the answer to the question that was posed in the Acts of the Apostles. So, Pharisees. And the Pharisees, sometimes we can be down on the Pharisees and think all the Pharisees were bad and all the Pharisees were just closed-minded and the Pharisees is just another word for bad person. But that's not really true. The Pharisees, they wanted to observe the law, but they kind of got the cart and the horse mixed up. They wanted to be followers of God, but their human nature, their fallen human nature, and their pride and other things kind of mixed them up. Well, some of them became followers of Jesus, but boy, they had a hard time letting go of some of the most important elements of their Jewish faith. And what were some of the most important elements of their Jewish faith? Circumcision and the dietary practices and these Mosaic regulations that were given in Deuteronomy. And so now they have embraced a faith life in Christ, but they haven't quite been able to let go. I have heard this argument. In fact, Ted Turner, I don't know if he's still alive or not, but Ted Turner, a very famous businessman and media mogul and America's Cup sailor and all that, one of his criticisms against Catholicism was that, last year, if you will, it was a sin to eat meat on Friday, and this year it's not, and that was his grief. That was one of his grievances against the church. So how do we respond to that? Last year it was a sin not to be circumcised. Last year, to be in covenant with God, you had to be circumcised 2,000 years ago. And now you're telling me you don't have to be. How does it change? How does that work? How does it work? We have the moral law, the unchanging, eternal moral law. Do not kill. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not bear false witness. Right? And a few others. And they don't change. And they can't change. They are eternal. And then we have disciplinary practices. We have disciplinary practices. And the disciplinary practices, they change in times and circumstances. And one of the disciplinary practices that God put on the nation of Israel was, you got to circumcise everybody, right? And when Jesus came, he freed them from the law of the flesh. One of the disciplinary practices was the Mosaic kosher laws. And when Jesus came, he freed them from those laws. Now, the church at one time felt like it was a good practice for everybody to abstain from eating meat on Friday as a way of being in communion with one another. It was a way of remembering the crucifixion of Christ. And then some years ago they said, maybe that's not a good discipline for everybody. Pick your own discipline on Friday. So, the Pharisees got their religious practice just a little mixed up. There are absolute, unchanging, and eternal laws in our faith, and they are the moral laws. And then there are the disciplinary practices that come and go in different times. Pope Benedict XVI, in his book, Jesus of Nazareth, it's actually a series of 3 books, has an excellent few chapters on this idea of the penitential and disciplinary laws of the Old Testament, and then the freedom that we have in Christ. So, tune in tomorrow, find out what happens in Jerusalem, okay?